Good afternoon, White Pine County School District, students, staff, parents. Thanks for tuning in today and catching this episode of Supe Stories. I'm your superintendent, Adam Young. And today I have the great pleasure and honor of sitting down with Jamie Mead. Jamie is a researcher, speaker, presenter, consultant, cheerleader, supporter of all things education, especially around the topic of hope. We worked with her and her organization a little bit earlier this school year with our district leadership team and just came away having learned so much. So Jamie, thank you for joining us today and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Adam. And thanks for the kind introduction. I have to say I've never been introduced that way, but I like it. Thank you for that. And thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. Again, thanks for being here. So I did my little brief introduction, but tell us a little bit more about Jamie Mead and the work that you do.
Yeah, so I started my teaching career over 35 years ago, and I started teaching in the very area, not unlike you, where I grew up, actually in the same hometown, same county, Southern Ohio region, right in the tri-state area of Ashland, Kentucky, and Huntington, West Virginia, Lawrence County, Ohio. Actually runs through the Appalachian Mountains. I often referred to myself as a rural educator until I made the trip out to Ely, Nevada, and I thought I can no longer say that I'm from rural America because I think you guys know a little bit more about that than I do. But yeah, so high school teacher, English teacher for a number of years, relocated to Central Ohio about 25 years ago. And started my career in administration, high school administrator, central office administrator, working in, like you said, all things education, curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And I made my way to Battelle for Kids about 10 years ago. And this work that we're going to talk about today, this science of hope, was a real compelling, felt like a calling for me to step into this space. My work is bigger than Hope Science at Battelle for Kids, but it was certainly my introduction and the pull for me to come into Battelle for Kids.
Yeah, just because I'm curious, what do you miss most about being, in a school, in a classroom, surrounded by all that excitement and all that? What do you miss the most?
You're so right. This time of year, I really miss it. I miss the back to school season, that fresh start. There's something about, that's New Year's for every educator, right? The back to school season. Hands down, it's the kids. It's being a high school teacher was a real calling for me because I love teenagers and youth. There's something that's incredibly inspiring and hopeful for me about that age group and how they view the world and what's possible. So I do miss that. I miss the interactions. I miss the humor. I love the day-to-day interactions with kids and how they see the world. So hands down, I miss that. I miss football Friday night. I know I can always go to that, but it always gets me going when I can join a staff convocation and hear the marching band. And I was always very involved as an educator in extracurricular. So I miss all of that. So I always say I haven't decided whether or not I'm going back or not. And that may be how I choose to end my career, is going back into the school setting.
Yeah, it's our homecoming week here at White Pine High School this week. And I think I mentioned when you were out here that I still teach choir every day. So I got to show you a picture here real quick. This is one of the dress up days. And this is my my twin. He's one of my choir singers named Ben Rhodes. He's a bass, and he dressed up today as me.
That's fantastic.
We've decided that he's gonna be my successor as the choir teacher and the superintendent someday. So like you say, it's just so many fun things.
That's great.
It's really terrific to be able to work with kids, and lots of highs, lots of tough things too. And maybe that's where this work that you've done around the science of hope, we can start off with that. Why you said you felt like that was a calling for you? Why is that a calling for you? Why is hope something that you feel is so needed just in the world in general today?
Yeah, great question. I think what the science of hope did for me is that when I discovered it accidentally, I think it validated for me a lot of what's at my core as an educator, and what I would submit is at the core of a lot of educators is I think educators by nature are hope builders. I think we are by nature invested in the future success of our students overall, generally speaking. In the field of education, I think that's what is pretty compelling to people that want to make a difference in the lives of children. So for me, Hope Science, when I first stumbled onto it, it validated, it gave me a language to really talk about and feeling more intentional and what I believe to be true about interactions between adults and students, and just how to navigate this ever-changing world that we're in, and this kind of rapidly changing world, the exponential change. And some of my most recent research has taken me down a road of really, what does the science of hope say about how we navigate change in our lives and how we feel about navigating an uncertain, unexpected future on the pathway of life? And it's been a little therapeutic. It's been for me a little reminder about, okay, this is what's happening in my brain. This is natural, this is normal. And it's sort of a playbook, if you will, to navigating some uncertainties. So I would tell you, just prior to coming to Battelle for Kids, I was working as a director of data and assessment. The causation between our practices as educators of what we do and the impact it makes on children has always been really compelling to me. And I think it was always my belief to use data to drive what you are doing requires a level of humility, that you step outside of yourself and you question your practice. Like, is this working? And so you take a look at data to help challenge your practice. And it takes that humility and that love of children to get beyond my own ego and to say, what's the data revealing here? So that was my path in Appalachia, to really use assessment data to guide my work. It was when I saw data that suggested that multiple research studies indicate that your HOPE score is a greater predictor of your future success than your ACT score, your SAT score, any standardized test, if you will. And I had long since regarded an ACT or an SAT, understood that it was more than just college entrance, that there was a college readiness component to that. But I think what those assessments do for us is really signal readiness in the academic arena. And that's important. And there's a lot of value in that. But the broader picture, right, of readiness to navigate the curveballs life might throw you beyond high school, right? Whether it's workforce or career you go straight into, or the Army, or you enlist. There's some skills that we need for navigating life. And so that validated for me what I thought, do academic measures, as important as they are, do they sometimes give us a false signal of readiness for future success? That, in other words, I'm suggesting there's that academic test scores alone may be insufficient, but there's a broader umbrella here we should be looking at for what our children, particularly in this day and age, need to prepare themselves for success into the future. And that's a lot of what we're talking about, what you're talking about in Ely around your portrait of a leader, right? What are those skills and mindsets that kids have to have, that we want our graduates to have, to navigate this ever-changing world and be ready to be contributors in our community and in our workforce. So
yeah, that's a really you covered a lot of ideas there, and it makes me think a little bit about one thing that you said when you were out here working with our leadership team. It's I mean, everybody can talk about hope. You're talking about what the data says, what the science, what the research says, and one of the things that you mentioned and hit on quite a bit when you were out here is that your work has led you to the conclusion that hope is not something that a person is either born with and they have, or maybe they had it and they lost it, or they never had it at all, but it is actually something, a skill and a mindset that we can develop through intentional practice, and that this part of the science is informing us as to how to go about doing that, so that it's not something that's fixed And if I feel hopeless today, that means I just, I'm going to be hopeless forever. So can you say a little bit more about that? What has your work, how has it informed you as an educational leader about developing hope, helping others, helping those that you lead, helping yourself, even your family, develop that skill, as opposed to just saying, oh, I just feel so hopeless about everything,
I mean, there's an irony, right, that studying hope science actually brings you hope because you realize, right, like it's a skill, it's a cultivate. You can be empowered to build your own hope in yourself and in others, and that knowledge itself kind of unlocks a lot of doors to possibilities. And I think there's a lot of educators who are discovering the science of hope and coming away from that feeling more equipped and empowered to change perhaps current circumstances. There's something about that. But the science of hope is actually comparative to all other sciences. You could argue it's relatively a newer science, a little over 3 decades of research we have. And I would say C.R. Snyder would be the father of the hope theory. And today, more than 30 years later, we have a whole new generation of hope scientists running a parallel track with what we know about brain science. And the more we learn about the human brain and brain science, the more we can learn about future thought and how our prefrontal cortex plays with our amygdala. There is a personal awareness around, okay, this is, kind of how my natural brain is wired to do. And then there's a sense of empowerment about how do I navigate, the brain is sort of the engine of hope, but I can choose hope in a moment. And so that notion that hope isn't fixed or genetic or a trait, there's a wealth of research out there that we can actually cultivate hope in ourselves and in one another through acquiring skills and mindsets and awareness. And when I say mindset, what I mean by that is a belief. This is my belief system, and that's related to my agency, the story I tell myself about my capabilities to take a step on a pathway that leads me to a future desired state. So it's pretty empowering to learn that it's not something that's fixed or genetic. And for educators, that's our work, right? I mean, if we can't do anything about it, we need to keep our focus on the things we can impact in the lives of children. And so to understand that hope matters and we can do something about it if we're equipped with the knowledge and skills to do so. So that in and of itself is pretty empowering for educators to know, particularly right now.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Amen. What's in your reading and research and discussions, what would you say that hope is not?
Yeah. So that's usually the first entry point I take when I'm talking to people about hope, because in our day-to-day lives, we use hope very frequently and informally to be synonymous with wishful thinking. That might be something like, I hope you have a nice day. Well, I'm wishing that you do, right? And so that takes on that kind of what you hear people say, hope is not a strategy. And that's a fair statement if you are still defining hope along the terms of synonymous with wishful thinking, because wishful thinking is not a strategy. So to really help people unpack, and that's why I always say the science of hope, because that's a little something different than hope as wishful thinking. So the science of hope really, as I mentioned through C.R. Snyder's work, positions hopeful thoughts and hopeful actions as really the 3 key ingredients of hope is really packaged around goals, pathways, and agency. So goals being really there's something in the future aspiration that is a future desired state that I aspire for myself, for my future, for my community's future, for my country's future, right? So that would be a goal. And if we stop right there, hope wouldn't be much more than wishful thinking, right? So goals is just 1/3 of hope science. So a lot of researchers refer to the other 2 component parts, pathways and agency, as the tools of hope, right? So how do I bridge between my current state and this future desired state, this aspiration, this wishful thought? Well, it's going to take a pathway, right? So what's your path between your current state and your future desired state? And so there's a lot up under the hood there of pathways. That's skills. That is, how do I have the problem solving skills that I need to navigate through barriers and obstacles on my pathway? Do I have a resilience when the going gets tough? When do I navigate ambiguity when I may be walking a pathway of uncertainty, right? I'm not sure where this is going to go in this moment. We get lots of curveballs thrown at us in life. So that's pathways. It's both a thought process, my resilience, my ability to stay the course, my grittiness, if you will, and my problem solving. You could unpack a lot of your portrait of a leader strategies and park them right there in how you navigate the pathway, right forward. And then that component part of agency is also, that's that belief system, the story I tell myself about my ability to execute on it. So goals, pathways, and agency. Agency is something that I'm really glad, pathways and agency, that educators are talking about across the country. So this is not something different. It's really helping people to see the alignment when we talk about pathways to careers, pathways to college, right? Those are big macro goals. Pathways can be, what's my strategy to connect me between point A and point B, whether they're small goals or big macro goals that I may have. I would also say, and this is an important component part of agency that just my work with educators, it sometimes gets misunderstood. And I would say agency can be about, empowerment, but a lot of hope researchers would say that agency is not about isolation. So when we are activating agency thinking at its highest levels, it's understanding that we ask questions around who can help me. And so high hope people tend to be resource seekers, if you will, networkers, and they're always looking for kind of who can go along or who can help me along on this pathway. So sometimes the word agency and autonomy get coupled together, and that's important because we can find agency and empowerment when we have the autonomy to feel like we're making choices and decisions on the pathway. But it's a mistake to associate autonomy with isolation. And so I grew up, rural Appalachia, where you'd hear people say, oh, that's about pull up your bootstraps, right? When the going gets tough, pull up your bootstraps. And I came across a researcher once who said, that can feel pretty isolating to people, like you're in it alone. And agency is about asking a different question, who can help me right now? And not being afraid to ask for help. And so hope researchers would say this is about we goals, not me goals, but also about who can help me. And I get asked that question a lot about hope science and the parallel track to people with a spiritual base. Like, where does that come in? My spirituality, my faith. And I would say it sits right there in your agency, knowing you're not walking alone, and how you tap into your faith and your belief system. So it's really kind of, you meet people where they are in this space and how people navigate their journeys through life, and how do I navigate through this hard time? And a lot of people, when they can see hope science is not something different from your perhaps your spirituality, I would submit that hope science is catching up with what we believe in our spiritual and our faith-based lives from day to day.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I hadn't thought about it that way before. I like the thought of agency being something that brings us or allows us the opportunity, empowers us, I think you might have used that word, to connect with other people. I have read, and a few years ago in our district, we studied Brene Brown's Dare to Lead book, connecting the idea of agency being a mechanism for hope with what Brene Brown says about, and I guess more specifically that agency also empowers a person to seek help, to seek supports and resources versus what Brene Brown talks about with shame, which is something that isolates us and that it thrives in secrecy. And that the only way to, to overcome that is to basically let it out. Like, yeah, you have to sometimes share some of those deepest and darkest and most painful things, even though that is really, really scary for a lot of people. But by doing that, and making yourself vulnerable, to me, there is a connection there with hope and not suffering in silence and that type of thing. A lot of people really struggle with asking for help.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's agree, and I think there was a book out last year published, Humility is the New Smart, and I could quickly read that and see a lot of connections to Hope Science, because it is about understanding there are a lot of people around you, especially in this day and age of, exponential growth of information, right? And that there's always people around you can learn something from, but only if you have the humility to understand, I don't know it all, right? So that I'm never the expert in this work, that there's people around me who can shed some light on things. And so that humility, I think, is really important, particularly in the 21st century. So and the vulnerability to walk a pathway that's uncertain or unknown. And I think that comes into the space of how do we grow our agency? How do people can really get stuck on a pathway, right? Like there's a barrier, an obstacle that arises. So what's the story I'm telling myself about my ability to navigate a new pathway or re-goal, if you will? And that's where my agency comes in. And that sometimes is necessary through experience. So we grow our agency through experience and overcoming challenges and obstacles. There's that's really interesting science there, that the degree to which I have experienced overcoming challenges and obstacles builds my agency. In other words, my story changes because I can overcome this because I have. I can do hard things because I have. And that's a challenge for educators, is to walk that balancing act of appropriate rigor and challenges to give our kids the dress rehearsal we need to overcome, life's challenges and barriers, but also removing unnecessary barriers in the pathway, right? And finding that sweet spot of how do we remove unnecessary barriers that make things frustrating for kids, or learning frustrating, or even impossible if we have barriers that block kids from their goals. But to find that sweet spot of giving them the right practice they need to build the resilience in that space is really important. That's another piece of this research around this ever-changing world, is the brain, and this is Brad Stulberg's new book out of Master of Change, talks about how our brain is really a prediction machine about what we expect might happen. So when I'm future casting or thinking about the future, I'm making a forecast about how's this path going to go for me. And the degree to which I get that prediction right, there's a sweet spot there of my own happiness and fulfillment. The bigger I'm off on that prediction can really be my personal dissatisfaction or lower my agency. So my prediction about what might happen, and that comes from, it parallels Shane Lopez's work in this space, with that when you think about your pathway forward, high hope people among us, they actually anticipate and plan for obstacles along the way. So that's that sweet spot of hope doesn't sit completely on the toxic positivity side or even naive positivity. Hope science is about hope can balance us to understand that life is full of highs and lows, and we're going to experience all of them, and that we have to really think about our better future, but anticipate things could go wrong here. And my ability to anticipate that what could possibly go wrong here is probably correlated to my experiences in the past, right? So if my path has been pretty smooth, I could be pretty naive about the challenges I might face. And so when I do experience challenges, it can throw me. It can throw my agency, right? Like, didn't see that coming. So I'm so fascinated by this because I think that's a big part of what we're all wrestling with right now in the 21st century is navigating uncertain or unforeseen change. And what's our readiness to do that,
Yeah, I really love that idea. And it makes me think about something that you said when you were out here. And I'll ask you about it because I'm sure that I don't have the citation right, or even have the citation actually. But I think I think that you said something about there is work that's been done that kind of illustrates that folks who have not experienced a lot of adversity have lower indexes of hope self-reported versus folks who have maybe encountered really tough stuff and they have that background and that resilience and the stick-to-itiveness, et cetera, that can only really be developed through adversity. So maybe say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this. And I think we hear this more as a parent, because I think it's our nature as parents to, you want your kids to have, maybe a little bit better than you did, or I don't want my kids to have to go through challenges or barriers that I had. And so we refer to that maybe as plowing the pathway, right? Let me doze this pathway for you and all the barriers and obstacles in it, because I want you to be successful. And all well intended, right? And it's probably deep in the DNA of a parent to feel that, but there is a sweet spot here of, and I would say to you, that's not easy research to cite because there are so many research studies that tell us that our experiences in anticipating and overcoming barriers and obstacles build our resilience and the degree to which we feel higher levels of hope, because it builds my agency, and there's lots of research studies on that. There is one particular study I was fascinated with that came out of a book called Adaptive Intelligence. And it really cited this notion that there are kids among us who are absolutely navigating some pretty fundamental basic needs in life, right? And they have to be pretty scrappy and they have to solve problems just for food, water, and shelter on a daily basis. And that many of kids who come from challenged environments really emerge with some skills that some researchers would say that they actually emerge with a level of cognitive giftedness for problem solving and adaptability skills that many of us would benefit from in the 21st century, because they do that on their day-to-day lives. And I think it's relative, right? All of our challenges and experiences and the story we tell ourselves about our ability to navigate is complex. So I don't want to simplify it. I don't want to make any show of glorifying challenges and hard times. That's not my intent here. There are unfortunately too many kids that have to struggle through. The point I want to make here is that those kids end up getting a set of adaptability skills that are valuable in the 21st century that others who may possess a different level of, what we might refer to as book smarts. It's sort of like in the 21st century, be careful what you call smart, because there's a whole different set of skills that we need to navigate this world.
Yeah.
So,
thank you. It is fascinating stuff, and I sure appreciate the tools that you have helped us acquire as we kind of start this journey on focusing on how we can be a little bit better at this as individuals and as part of a system. What would be your parting maybe a summary statement or synopsis of what this science tells us, and just for anybody who's watching, how understanding some of this science can help us be more hopeful?
Yeah, great question. And I want to say that the path that I have walked on is really a path of following so many talented, dedicated researchers in hope science. So I would say that I'm a follower of the work that a lot of other people are doing. And I'm fascinated by it. And I see my role, if there is a unique role in this, is helping to translate, if you will, what are the implications of what all of these talented researchers are finding, and what difference can we make as teachers, as educators, as administrators in education from what this science says. So a little bit of a translator back to the education profession for really thinking about what I wish I had known before I started teaching. So, but I also want to say it's important to note this is complex. Human nature and how we navigate our hopeful thought, our brain, each of our individual paths is complex. And I never want to oversimplify this as, oh, this is, hope's going to cure it all. And just read this book and you're going to be all, everything's going to be dandy. And so I would say what I am finding here is my own journey. And there's a lot of important nuggets that we can all learn more about. Great research, growing body of research on. I just want to plant that seed that makes enough interest for people to want to go and start reading a little bit more on their own. And I would say that starts with the work of C.R. Snyder and Shane Lopez that I find are just the pioneers in hope science, but also to the recent Hope Rising book of Casey Gwynn and Chan Hellman, great contribution published during the global pandemic. There's just all kinds of nuggets out there where these researchers are really building and complementing one another's work. So I think there's a lot to learn, and you can really do it a disjustice by oversimplifying it. But I thank you for bringing me in and having what I would say an introductory conversation on the science of hope. And I think we try to meet people where they are in the moment, and maybe they get a few nuggets or morsels out of this that help them move forward and build their own hope and hope in others.
Yeah, Jamie, thank you so much. We really did have a great experience when you were out here. We learned so much. It's been helpful, and I appreciate the time and sitting down and talking today. And look forward to connecting with you soon.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership, because I have the great pleasure of traveling all over the country, and I can still see faces in the room, and just had a really good experience there, and felt your educators were so open to learning that and very curious about that. And that felt like a really good connection there. And I enjoy learning from educators like you and your team across the country as well. So thank you so much.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Don't forget to share this on your social media platforms, and leave some comments and feedback for us, and very much appreciate you tuning in today. Jamie, we'll catch you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.